Alright guys, welcome back to the start of another brand new project. So in this one we're going to be building the Aquila display cabinet. Now this has been a long time coming. I know for some of you guys you probably saw me release some videos early on about this project and then remove them, but I am so excited to finally be sharing this project with you guys in its completed form. So one of the things you're going to hear me mention a lot during this project is how things ended up taking way more time than expected. So I'll start off by mentioning that when I started this project, my goal behind it was to do something that was fairly simple. I want to just make a nice, easy display cabinet, do some hand-cut dovetails, throw in a little bit of stained glass work. I never could have imagined when I started this project just how long it would end up taking. And interestingly enough, this project didn't actually take that long. It was just kind of everything else I had going on in my life that ended up kind of taking time away from the shop, or just meant that I couldn't physically be out working on this stuff. So this has been a long time coming with this project, and again, I'm very excited to finally have this thing done and be able to share it with you guys. Now with all of our panels milled up, one of the things I decided to do with this project was try out doing some hand-cut dovetails. Now I'm not new to doing hand-cut dovetails, I just haven't done them in a very long time. And again, this project for me was all about finding some more enjoyment in woodworking, figuring out kind of what I wanted to do. Because now that I actually have a fairly good, stable job, my idea of trying to become a woodworker and trying to make money off of that is no longer there. Now I really just want woodworking to be about relaxing. I want it to be something that I do to kind of just bring some enjoyment back to life. Whereas before I kind of got a job and started kind of figuring out my life, woodworking was the thing. I had to do it because I had to make videos, and that's just felt like was my job at that point in time, which then led to me not really enjoying what I was doing. So again, the whole thing that I was trying to focus on with this project is I only wanted to work on it when I was in the mood to actually do some woodworking. I only wanted to work on it when I was gonna actually enjoy working on it. And one of the things I did find during this whole project is that the more that I let myself just kind of go with the flow, let myself, when I wanted to go out to the shop, I could go out to the shop and do a little bit of work. I did find that I really just enjoyed working on this project. Even with all the little hiccups and all the little issues that I ran into, I did genuinely enjoy working on this project. And this is actually a very interesting part of it too, the hand-cut dovetails, because again, it's been a while since I've tried to hand-cut dovetails on a project, especially one that's as large as this. And I will say that it did take a little bit of practice, and the nice thing is that I know further down in the design we're going to be covering up all these dovetails with some nice round over trim, so it doesn't matter how bad they looked, and honestly they looked pretty rough. But again, it was fun to just get out there and work a little bit slower, just work with my hands, because I'm not such a hardcore hand tool user that I think that that's the only route. I think machine cut dovetails are just as good as hand cut dovetails. Really, there's no difference. It just really comes down to the pace, or kind of the mentality behind it. When you're doing stuff with machinery, you're getting it done fast, it's very efficient, but you don't always get to feel the kind of I don't really know how to explain it. There's a lot more of a kind of an emotional connection to the wood when you're kind of slowing it down and you're just working with your hands. And that to me is actually something that's very important. So as I kind of think about what I'm doing with future projects, there's going to be some times where I'm going to choose to do stuff by, kind of the slower, the hand tool method. There's going to be times where I choose to do things with more expensive power tools. It's all going to just kind of depend on what I want to do in that moment. Because also, the other thing that I found is there was some days where I was happy to go out and do the hand cutting of these dovetails. Because again, it was just that nice, slow, consistent work that let me just relax and focus on what I was doing. But then there was other days where I really didn't want to go out and work on these hand-cut dovetails because they take a lot of work. Especially when we get onto this part, and this is always the part that I forget about hand-cut dovetails, is always cleaning up the baseline. Now, it really is not that bad, it doesn't take that much extra work, but you do have to have very, very sharp tools, which then takes time. It also just takes a lot of time and effort and focus to get that nice, square, and straight baseline. So, again, it all comes down to just figuring out what I would like to do with each project I do. And what's really nice now is that through the tools and that I've bought over the past years, I've got really nice, Veritas PMV11 chisels. I've got all of my really nice hand planes, but I also have this beautiful Lee dovetail jig. And so I can really go either route. I can either use all hand tools, I can use a mixture of hand tools and power tools, or I can go all power tools. Again, just really depending on the mood that I'm in, whether I want to get some work done really quickly or I just want to slow down and relax. So one of the things you guys are going to see in a lot of future projects is there's going to be a massive variation on how I choose to do things. And honestly, I think that's one of the things that I would really personally like to see more of on YouTube, is I tend to find that a lot of people on YouTube kind of pick a route and they just stay with it. They do one thing one way and that's how they always do it. Whereas like for me, I want to try and have some more variation. I want to show both the hand tool and the power tool methods. I want to overall just kind of show a more realistic approach to woodworking, because it's not even so much just embracing the hybrid approach. I think it's very much so embracing just natural woodworking. Again, because most of us, when we go out to the shop, we either have very little time, if you have family or jobs or just other responsibilities in life, sometimes you just don't have the time to get out there, and that's when power tools can really save you a lot of time. You don't always have the time to go to the shop, spend 4 or 5 hours hand cutting some dovetails, so being able to throw a piece of wood into something like the Lee jig is just nice and quick and efficient. Whereas for other people, if you've got, let's say, 6 months and you just want to work on one project, kind of like I did here, that's fine too. You can just have that project constantly on the go, and that can be just your way of relaxing. Now for me personally, I do have to find some different approach, because obviously YouTube here is one of my main focuses. It is kind of the career path that I would like to go. I do have this really good stable job that I genuinely love. I really do enjoy going to work every day because I managed to find myself a job that I genuinely enjoy. But it's not something that I want to do forever. Whereas this whole YouTube, woodworking, content creation, this part of my life is definitely the focus. It's the thing that I would like to do with the rest of my life. So tying that back into the idea that I was talking about before, this project took me a little over 6 months, and that is a ridiculous amount of time to spend on one project for me. And again, because I need to make these videos in order to build the YouTube channel and to kind of get the content out there, I really have to find a way to bring better balance. Now, one of the reasons this project did take so long wasn't because, again, the project is super complicated. It's actually because I had a lot of really good stuff happen in my life at that point. So about in February, a supervisor role opened up at my job, and my manager, as well as a few other people, kind of encouraged me to go for it. I didn't really think that was something I was interested in, but the opportunity was there, so I ended up going for it. And long story short, I managed to get the position, which I was super excited about. And because of this new position, I had a lot more responsibility and I had to do a lot more training. So I got to do a whole bunch of really cool stuff. I even managed to get sent to Montreal for a week to do some training, and I got to spend all my free time wandering around Montreal, exploring the place. Overall, it was just a very, very cool time. And again, it's one of the reasons why I do really like my job right now, is because I get to do stuff that is a lot more interesting, a lot more technical, and it's just kind of fun. Not to mention, I do have some even cooler training coming up in a few weeks here that I might tell you guys about in a while. But anyway, what that kind of meant is that there was a lot of time where my brain was just fried. And for the life of me, I couldn't get out to the shop and focus on woodworking, because all I needed to do was either just sleep or, play some video games, just do something that didn't require too much of my focus. So the other part of that though now is most of my training is done. Other than this last little bit that I have to do sometime in September, pretty much all of my training is done. So now it's just kind of a matter of going to work every day, which is honestly, again, it's not hard. It's not really a particularly hard job that I do. So now I do have much more ability to focus on these projects. So again, I'm hoping going forward here, I can definitely focus in more on just getting these projects done. So I don't want to go quite back to where I was before I started my job, and when I was trying to pump out a project every single month, because I think that that's a little bit, a little too extreme. I don't think I have the schedule ability for that. But I will say I would like to be trying to do a project every, 2 to 3 months, still kind of getting them out there consistently enough. But diving back into this project, you can see here just how rough my hand-cut dovetails are. Now, I'm trying to do the kind of the cinematic thing here and not do too many close-ups, but the important thing here is that they are square, and that is one of the things that I was actually very concerned about when I was doing this project, is whether or not I was actually going to be able to get good square dovetails. Because again, not having done this for a while, I didn't know how bad my skills had deteriorated. Now, as we actually moved to more of the internals of the casework here, this is where things did get a little bit more complicated, trying to figure out how I was going to align things, because what we need to do now is actually go through and put in some grooves that are then going to hold our middle divider shelf as well as some drawer guides later on. And the big thing here is, again, this is where I really had to kind of take some time to kind of remember how to do things, because one of the things I did find very interesting is that as I was working on this project, and again, just because of the time span, there was a lot of things where I just couldn't remember how I'd learned to do something. Because since I started woodworking, my skills have very much so improved. But the problem with that is, as you're kind of improving, you're learning new skills, you're finding all these new little techniques and ways that you can either do things better or faster, more accurately. However, whatever the improvement is, you're always going to find those little things that are going to improve your skills. But the problem is, unless you kind of write that down or you find some way to remember it, over time, you're going to forget that skill. And then when you go back and do something, like this is a perfect example, flattening a board with hand planes, using those winding sticks, understanding and remembering how to read those winding sticks, that is a skill that very much so can deteriorate over time. So it's one of those things, while I was working on this project, every time I ran into one of those spots where I was like, I don't quite remember how to do what I want to do here, or, I don't remember why I chose to do this thing this way in the past, it was a lot of relearning the same techniques I've already learned. So it was a bit annoying trying to go through and figure out what I'd forgotten and what I needed to relearn, but again, eventually a lot of the stuff started coming back to me, and the project did kind of get easier throughout. Now, I think it's important to mention that when you're looking at this divider panel that we're working on right now, it looks horrible. My choice of wood here would have been really bad if not for a very important design decision with this cabinet. Something that we're going to talk about a little bit more in the next video when we actually get into it. But the important thing to understand here is that this was actually a very intentional choice. I tried to pick the absolute worst pieces of wood I possibly could, because you're not going to see them once this cabinet is fully completed. But anyway, this middle divider is kind of a perfect example of trying to relearn things I already knew. So what I had to try and figure out here is how to get these tenons nicely fitted up. I want about as clean of a fit as I could possibly get. Even though we're going to be covering this up with trim later on, it didn't really matter. I wanted it to look good. I want to try and take this time to really focus in and practice my joinery. So what I did is I got my shoulders established on the table saw, because that is the cleanest, most accurate way to establish those shoulders. Anytime I've tried to go in and clean up the shoulders of a tenon with a block plane, a ravening plane, whatever, it never works out super well. So what I did is I got the shoulders established on the table saw, then I was able to use my router plane to really dial in the thickness of that tenon. Then I could go over to the shooting board and get things down to just a perfect fit. And I was so happy with the way that this middle divider went in. You can kind of see on the one side there, it's a little bit cupped, but with a little bit of clamping pressure, I was able to get this thing perfectly seated in place. And again, it's going to be completely invisible once this project is done. We're going to be basically covering up all of the joinery that I just spent a bunch of time doing. But the big thing here was it was just an opportunity to practice. Because on this project, it really doesn't matter how good it looks. But on a future project, it might. It might come into play. I might decide to do a nice simple dado joint like that I want to leave visible. So again, one of the things I'm going to be trying to focus on going forward is making sure that anytime I do really any form of joinery, whether it's going to be visible or not visible, I want to make sure that it looks good, if not just for the practice opportunity. So with the casework mostly together, I was able to mark out a few dados to go in our bottom area to kind of divide up where our drawers are going to go. And I want you guys to watch this part very, very carefully and just keep it in mind for when we get to the last video in this project, because this is going to be, something important is going to happen here. But anyway, I took my time, I tried to lay out my measurements, and we're just going to set up a nice simple dado stack. And my idea here was actually very simple and straightforward. All I needed to do was cut some dados in these spots and make sure that they were aligned between that middle divider and that bottom panel, just so that everything kind of lined up. So I had to do everything by hand. It was a little bit challenging, but I managed to get everything perfectly aligned with each other, which was actually kind of surprising. And overall, the idea, in hindsight, it was a really good idea. I really liked it. It was very simple, it was lightweight, but I don't want to spoil anything from the later part of this series that explains it a little bit better, so I will just leave it till then. So anyway, with the glue up here, I decided to use hide glue just because it's one of my favorite glues to use for complex joinery or kind of case glue ups like this. You know, when you're doing smaller pieces or gluing up panels, I think Titebond is always your best option. But when doing case work like this, I think that using hide glue, just because it has a little bit of a longer open time, it also kind of tends to lubricate the joint so things slide together. It just makes the glue up a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful. But that is going to do it for this part of the Aquila display cabinet. As always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.